Chapter 2, Personality and Sport. Personality is the sum of the characteristics that make a person unique. The study of personality helps us to work better with students, athletes, patients, and exercisers. In addition, it also helps us to work more effectively with coworkers. Sometimes people confuse attitude and personality. Personality is who you are. An attitude can be more dependent upon certain situations, time, or other people. Defining personality can be a little bit tricky, but all definitions have one aspect that is similar. They include the fact that people are unique. So uniqueness is the similar aspect. As you are listening to this lecture, think about these next 4 questions. These questions won't be a part of your examination, but they can be helpful to ponder when we are discussing personality. Your answer is unique to you as it's part of your personality. Question 1. How can personality influence performance or attractiveness of a particular sport to us? Some of you may be former athletes, or you regularly participate in physical activity. If so, how did you choose your sport? Number 2. What forces how we behave as we do in certain circumstances? Does your personality determine how you react? If you stub your toe, do you cry out in pain? Do you get really quiet? Do you use choice curse words? I won't tell if you do. Do you punch things? What's your reaction? This is all part of personality. Number 3. Do athletes who play certain sports have similar personality characteristics? Think back on some of your experiences. Think of the other people you have participated with. Did they have a similar personality? And if they did you get along? If they had a differing personality, did you struggle to get along? Were they competitive? Were they loud or quiet? Did you have a lot of personality traits in common with these other individuals? And lastly, number 4, does sport build character, or is it related to positive character or psychological development? Do you personally feel like participation in physical activity or sports can help someone build character? Are sports and exercise related to developing individuals? Again, each one of your answers is probably a little bit different for these questions. There's no wrong answer, and there's no right answer. This is all part of your development and your personality. And we're back to the lecture. So if you were taking notes, this is a good time to start back up. So what makes up personality? The best way to understand personality is through its structure. If we think about personality as being divided into 3 separate but related levels, a psychological core, typical responses, and role-related behavior. The basic level of personality is the psychological core. This includes your attitudes and values, interests and motives, and beliefs about yourself and your self-worth. This is considered the real you, not who you want others to think you are. These are typically things that you value in your life, such as family, friends, and religion. Typical responses are the ways in which we learn to adjust to the environment, or how we usually respond to the world around us. How you act on what you perceive your social situation to be is called role-related behavior. This behavior is the most changeable aspect of personality. Your behavior changes as your perceptions of the environment around you changes. Different situations require us to play different roles. The 3 levels of personality encompass a continuum from internally driven to externally driven behaviors. To examine this, role-related behavior is the most external thing that everyone sees about each other. The most internal aspect is our psychological core. The psychological core is the most stable or constant part of your personality, and it remains fairly consistent over time. The role-related behaviors are the most external and can be subjected to the greatest influence from external social environmental factors. In order to help individuals become more successful, more proficient, or more motivated, we must figure out what makes people tick and be able to help them. We need to know as much about them as possible to be able to affect people's core values and assist them with rehabilitation or improve performance. If we know people just as their role-related behavior, we don't know them very deeply. We need to get into their psychological core to really have an impact on individuals. So really, what makes up personality? What makes a person? Personality is what we can see on the outside. Character is internal characteristics. We have to get to know a person before they may share their character with us. As we are going along in this course, it's important to remember several things. Psychology and most other fields are filled with approaches and theories. These theories and approaches provide us with the basics for understanding and explaining why and how various things occur. It is also important to remember that some theories apply in certain situations and to some individuals, but others do not. There's no cookbook method for psychologically assessing someone or even treating someone. We have to try different things. Some of these approaches and theories are more current and relevant. Some are heavily studied, and unfortunately some are not. So we have to be careful. As we are trying to understand personality, it is important to differentiate between the states and the traits. States represent our current or situational state of being. These can change with the situation. Traits, on the other hand, represent our general or most of the time state of being. Psychologists have examined personality from multiple viewpoints. 5 of the major ways of studying personality in sport and exercise are the psychodynamic, trait, situation, interactional, and phenomenological approaches. The first approach that we'll examine is the psychodynamic approach. This approach was popularized by Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and Erik Erikson. This approach is divided into 2 themes. The first places emphasis on the unconscious determinants of behavior. This includes instinctive drives, moral consciousness, and conscious personality. The second theme focuses on understanding the whole person. The psychodynamic approach views personality as a set of dynamic processes in conflict with each other. The second approach is the trait approach. The trait approach states that personality can be described in terms of an individual's traits. These traits are relative and stable. These traits predispose us to act in a certain way regardless of the situation we are in. Personality traits are enduring and consistent across a variety of situations. Taking the trait approach, psychologists consider that the cause of behavior generally resides in the person, and that the role of the situation or environmental factors is minimal. Remember, traits are considered to predispose a person to act in a certain way, regardless of the situation or circumstance. The trait approach, which dominated the early study of personality, does not consider the particular situations that may also influence an individual's behavior. Today, the Big Five trait model of personality is the most widely accepted of these theories. The approach for the Big Five trait model, this is the mostly accepted descriptive model of personality. It consists of 5 dimensions of personality. There are 5 dimensions of the trait model. Neuroticism, which includes nervousness, anxiety, depression, and anger, versus emotional stability. We have extroversion, which includes enthusiasm, sociability, assertiveness, and high activity level versus introversion. Openness to experience, which includes originality, the need for variety, and curiosity. The next one is agreeableness, which includes amiability, altruism, and modesty. The 5th is conscientious. This includes constraint, achievement striving, and self-discipline. All of these domains have been found to organize personality at the highest level. The Big Five trait model has started to be applied to the sports population recently as well. The situational approach states that personality is determined mostly by situation and/or the environment. This means that personality is based on modeling and feedback. Another approach is the interactional approach. This approach considers the situation or environment and person as co-determinants of behavior. This theory is now highly favored for studying behavior. The last approach is the Phenomenological Approach. This approach states that behavior is best determined by accounting for situational and personal characteristics. This means that a person's understanding and interpretation of oneself and the environment are critical. This theory is also currently favored and is widely used in the literature. Overall, in summary, these 5 different approaches or viewpoints can help us to examine personality. The different approaches have allowed us to understand personalities at many different levels. It is important to understand that these approaches are not vastly different from each other. Rather, these approaches vary along a continuum of behavior determination ranging from the view that behavior is determined by a person's internal characteristics, such as in the psychodynamic theory, to the view that behavior is determined by the situation or environment, such as the situational approach. On the other hand, these approaches vary greatly in terms of the assumptions about the origins of human behavior, such as whether behavior is determined by fixed traits or by conscious or subconscious determinants, and how important a person's active interpretation of self and the environment are. Among current practices, the interactional and phenomenological views are the most often accepted and widely used approaches. So what about common sense? How does this play into the psychology of sport? We know many athletes are insanely successful. What about the research? Is there anything that links personality to success? Please know that you do not have to memorize all of the research related to psychological aspects of sport and exercise. The only reason why we are discussing these studies is to better understand what areas have previously been examined. Research can help guide us to know where we are going. There is a relationship between personality states, traits, and performance. The research out there is far from perfect. Trait to performance relationships have been identified. There is no single personality profile to separate athletes from non-athletes. Athletes tend to possess greater objectivity, independence, and tend to be less anxious than the general population. Few distinguishable characteristics have been found between the genders. This is particularly so at the elite level of athletics. Morgan's mental health model. After comparing personality traits of more successful athletes to those of less successful athletes using measures called the Profile of Mood States, or POMS, P-O-M-S, Morgan developed a mental health model that he reported to be effective in predicting athletic success. This research suggests a greater positive mental health in successful athletes than in non-successful athletes. The scores are based on the Profile of Mood States, or POMS test. Successful elite athletes in a variety of sports, for example, swimmers, wrestlers, oarsmen, and runners, are characterized by what Morgan called the Iceberg Profile, which reflects positive mental health. The Iceberg Profile of a successful elite athlete shows vigor above the mean of the population, but tension, depression, anger, fatigue, and confusion all below the mean of the population. This profile looks like an iceberg, and that all negative traits are below the surface, or population norms, and that one positive trait, vigor, is above the surface. In contrast, less successful elite athletes have a flat profile, scoring at or below the 50th percentile on nearly all psychological factors. This chart demonstrates the profiles for elite wrestlers, distance runners, and rowers. Morgan's mental health model proposes that successful athletes exhibit greater positive mental health than less successful or unsuccessful athletes exhibit. Tests can help identify an athlete's psychological strength and weakness, and this information can then be used to develop appropriate training in psychological skills. Personality tests are useful tools that can help us better understand, monitor, and work with athletes and exercisers. They are not magical instruments that allow us to make sweeping generalizations about an individual's behavior or performance. Exercise appears to have a positive relationship with self-concept. Exercise and increased fitness are associated with increased self-esteem. We see larger effects with individuals who started with low esteem before they started exercising. The research has suggested that changes in self-concept may be associated with the perception of improved fitness rather than the actual change in physical fitness. For example, girls participating in running programs had positive changes in their global self-esteem and in appearance, peer, physical, and running self-concepts. Some of us are familiar with type A behavior. Type A behavior is usually neat and tidy and pays close attention to details, and they feel like they're in control of a lot of things. Type A behavior patterns can be apparently altered through exercise, and this can reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. Type A behavior is characterized by a strong sense of urgency, an excess of competitive drive, and easily aroused hostility. Type B behavior is considered the opposite of type A. A link has been established between type A behavior and increased incidence of cardiovascular disease. Previous research has examined personality and sport type or sport choice. At this point in time, we do not have any way to tell what sport fits an individual's personality best. In another example, for personality and athletic research findings, Thier and Greer examined personality traits of bodybuilders. They found that bodybuilders had high scores in achievement motivation and resistance to change. The bodybuilders ranked normal everywhere else. Another research study by Kroll and Crenshaw examined football, wrestling, karate, and gymnastics participants. Their data suggested that wrestlers and football players had similar profiles. Gymnasts and karate participants had markedly different profiles from wrestlers and football players. Other researchers have examined the effects of psychological characteristics on participants in both team and individual sports. Singer examined baseball and tennis players. This study demonstrated definite psychological differences between team and individual sport athletes. Team players scored higher in desire to do one's best, desire to lead, and ability to analyze others. And the team players were less willing to accept blame. Another research team also observed the personality traits of participants in team and individual sports. Schur, Ashley, and Joy found that team sport participants report more anxious, dependent, extroverted characteristics and are less sensitive to others. Other researchers have examined player and positional personality profiles. Cox examined different athletes participating in volleyball. They found, compared to strong side hitters and middle blockers, setters have broad internal focus and could focus on several things at once. So how can you, as a budding professional, understand personality? How can you use this information to better understand individuals in your classes, on your teams, or your future clients? These guidelines can help us to better understand people with whom we work. Remember, personality needs to be considered with both personality traits and situations. We need to be an informed consumer of personality testing. We need to be a good communicator. And like you may have heard sometimes, we just need to be quiet and observe. We also need to be knowledgeable about mental health strategies to help those that we work with to excel, and we need to know referral services if they are beyond our capability. To wrap it all up, let's recap and discuss the important aspects of personality in sport. Personality is complicated. The basic unit of personality is uniqueness. In learning about people, we can better learn how to help them and achieve greatness if we can know the true person. We need to know them at their core.